I already talked about how anxiety and pressure can impact performance and that simulations are one of the best tools to overcome them. So in this video, I will talk a bit more about what makes a good simulation. These are strategies that are used by Olympic athletes, but most of them can profit anyone. The notion that simulations can help with stress management comes from both anecdotes and the scientific research. For example, Darryl Pace used to train close to highways to get used to distracting stimuli. Then Ryan, after a failure due to nervousness in 1992, asked to be supported by a sports psychologist. Then he trained for 4 years with competition simulations. At the 1996 Olympics, he won gold, setting a new decathlon world record. So, what makes a good simulation? Comp walls are getting more and more common in climbing gyms. It is common to see now people emulating the bouldering competition format.
To keep it kind of close to an Olympic format, we're going to pick, should we pick four problems and run a little comp format on them. So you get 4 minutes and try and get up them.
This is a good start because it teaches you how to manage attempts, time and skin in a bouldering competition. But while it might increase pressure to have time limits, it is not enough to exacerbate the psychological processes that we have in a real competition. For example, distractors play a big role into focus. The increase in anxiety makes our information processing less efficient, and this in turn makes us more prone to distractors. That is why in some interventions, sports psychologists use speakers to emulate crowd noise. If you really need to get used to the setting and the event is very important to you, like a World Cup, yes, Emil Abrahamsson, come si dice? Abrahamsson. Google. Translato.
Emil Abrahamsson.
Abrahamsson. Emil Abrahamsson. Yes, I'm talking about you, Emil Abrahamsson. Yes. No. I would think about putting some crowd noise in the headphones. Another example, time passes much faster when you're doing something else, including just talking.
You need the, I don't know if I've got time left, but you need the foot up here, I think.
If you're doing a bouldering competition simulation, try not to talk to anyone between boulders. Not only you'll notice that time will pass much more slowly, it will also change the content of your thoughts. It's important that you get used to these effects as well. And then there's the fatigue factor. There are 2 possible strategies and they're usually both employed. One is to increase the fatigue level with some pre-simulation high-intensity exercises. This will teach the athlete to fight even in adverse conditions. But at the same time, it is also important that in a simulation, the athlete is not always given an external cause of possible failure. That is why it's important to make a highly salient simulation in which the athlete is given the best possible conditions. If you are training properly for an important competition, you should have a periodization schedule that makes you arrive to the event in the best conditions as possible. This is why in the simulation it should be exactly the same, meaning that they should train in the exactly same way. Athletes usually struggle with the deload period that comes before a competition, since they're so used to high levels of activity.
So maybe we don't put this in the film, but I actually never used to take deload weeks.
You can definitely put that in there.
No way.
It's on. No. Sam's recording.
And I'd maybe just go outside climbing a bit more in that week. So I really struggle with the thought of a deload week and the thought of doing less.
Making this sacrifice for a simulation will increase sunk costs and improve commitment. Finally, a good simulation should be designed to tackle specific conditions. For example, in a soccer simulation, the team could have one less player on the ground. In climbing, humidity plays a big role. Emulation of high humidity conditions are easily achieved by putting on some more layers of clothes. Adam Ondra took this element to the extreme. He built a training wall in a sauna to get used to the heat and to the humidity that he would find in the Olympics in Tokyo. Crazy.
Yes, we built a sauna. A climbing wall in the sauna.
I would do the same if I could. Also, having other athletes participate in the simulations is a great way to have a real comparison. I'm very glad to see that Team Austria and Team Germany organize this type of events.
Trying to beat you. You're trying to beat me. Trying to beat you.
Während der Runde war ich nicht so richtig zufrieden mit meiner Performance, weil es eben noch mal wieder was anderes war nach so einer langen Wettkampfpause mit allen zusammen. Ich war wirklich nervös, muss ich ehrlich sagen, aber daraus lerne ich.
I don't even know how many tries this was. My performance wasn't really the best, but on the mental side, I didn't get angry and I could still keep the focus on to try to solve the problems and not be obsessed with my own mistakes.
I guess from all this, you can already get a rough idea of what is instead a bad simulation. If you have to emulate the setting conditions, it is evident that taking off your shirt for extra power is not functional in this case.
I'll try a 7A. This pink one is 7A.
Okay.
I'll just try it straight away. And shirtless too.
Shirt off.
It's easy to take off. I don't know if it's easy to put on, honestly.
Taking off your shirt is a routine that is usually employed to tune yourself into your zone of optimal functioning. It is an effective strategy, but it is also quite inflexible. First, you can only take your shirt off once. And second, there are simply situations in which you cannot take it off. I know, Magnus, this is a reason why you retired. Might be because of a competition rule, might be because of public morals, how it usually happens in America, that you cannot take off your shirt. Or even just because of weather conditions. If you are the type that uses this kind of routine, I will highly suggest to find alternatives so that you can tune yourself into that state in the best way as possible, even when you cannot take off your shirt. The environment also plays a big role. If you know that you're going to another city to do the competition or follow the event, it is important that you get used to the new environment and the new routines that you're going to follow.
実際なんかオリンピックのその日よりも1週間前くらいの方が本当に調子が良くて、スピードも良かったし、なんかボルダーもリードもなんかオリンピックの当日よりも調子が良かったのね。でもやっぱり直前になんかまあ1週間前くらいからホテルに入ったんだけど、やっぱりホテルに入ってまあ自分の環境が変わったりとか、まあ選手村とか行ってたらなんかもう本当にオリンピックなんだなっていう気持ちになってきちゃって、実際最後はなんかメンタル的にあんまり良くない状態で大会出ちゃったなって思ってるし。
Obviously, it's not always possible to change house or go to a hotel, but what you can do is to change your routine in what would be a hotel-like situation. So, for example, change your breakfast, make it completely different, make someone else do it for you. And then there's planning, another fundamental element. A good simulation should be far in time from the real event. First, because of the training periodization. Ideally, you would want a really important simulation between 4 and 6 months before the actual thing. In fact, Meiichi Narazaki showed concern for his skin when he had to do a competition simulation just 5 days before the Japanese Cups. An element like this might drive the athlete to commit less and to perform less well, with an eventual loss in self-efficacy. Or, in the other option, to have still high intensity and high commitment, but with the decrease in skin for the real competition.
指皮をなくさないように。
そうですね。まあ指皮なくさないで4巻4撃すれば。
Finally, it is important that the simulation drives strategies for the eventual pitfalls that might arise. In the same video, you see Tomoe Narazaki that is struggling in trying to keep his composure when he makes early mistakes.
やっぱりトモとか露骨にその前1個登れなかったからずっと引きずったまんま次のトライしちゃった。
His coach explains the situation to make it more salient for him. But in an ideal situation, the athlete should be given a strategy to overcome this problem. It could be a familiar routine, for example, or a management technique. Because we unfortunately know that consciousness is the first and necessary step to overcome a problem, but is often not enough. You need to have a plan to overcome it. I see that in climbing, psychological interventions are still not common and left to intuition. Who knows what levels we could see once the athletes reach the same level of the other Olympic sports. And this was it. These are the strategies that Olympic athletes use to overcome pressure and anxiety. I hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay psyched.